Ethan Cole was Tulsa's most powerful energy CEO, sharp, relentless, and alone. From his glass office atop the skyline, he saw numbers rise but never heard the music of a family he lost years ago. That changed one afternoon when a boy selling handmade wind chimes on a broken lawn shouted, "Dad, listen!" The sound stopped Ethan cold. The boy's eyes, the chime's melody, it all stirred a memory, a name. Grace. Once she'd loved him deeply, but he left, misled by a lie whispered by someone he trusted, his cousin Mark. Now, standing before this boy named Jack, clever and full of music, Ethan wonders, did he miss 9 years of fatherhood? As wind chimes sing through the Tulsa breeze, secrets begin to surface. Why did Grace hide Jack? What did Mark gain by breaking them apart? With each note Jack crafts, Ethan begins to rebuild what was broken. A music program, a second chance, a promise. But when betrayal strikes again, will Ethan have the courage to fight for the family he never knew he had? And in the end, can a single chime, made by a boy's small hands, heal years of silence? Subscribe to see this heartfelt story unfold. One note, one truth at a time. The wind whispered low outside Ethan Cole's 42nd floor office, rattling the floor-to-ceiling glass. Tulsa spread beneath him, grids of light, silent smokestacks, highways threading through dark fields. But inside, it was silent. Too silent. Ethan leaned back in his chair, jaw tight, ignoring the blinking phone beside him. Another merger. Another investor pitch. Another chance to build bigger. And yet, none of it filled the space she used to occupy. He reached into his drawer, pulling out an old photo. Grace at 28, holding a sunflower by her cheek. Her eyes laughed even when her lips didn't. He hadn't seen her in a decade, not since... A knock broke his thoughts. "Sir," said Dana, his assistant, peeking in, "you're due at the festival site inspection. They're waiting." He nodded, slipping the photo into his coat pocket. Minutes later, Ethan's black SUV rolled into a rough patch of North Tulsa. Bright banners hung over an old park gate, melodic Chime Festival, community first. The place was modest, handmade stalls, kids with paint on their jeans, wind chimes swaying in the breeze like silver whispers. He stepped out, adjusting his collar, trying to ignore how out of place his polished shoes looked on the cracked sidewalk. Local sponsors had begged him to show face. Ethan expected a photo op. Instead, he got something else entirely. "Dad, listen!" The voice cut through the noise like a siren. He turned. A boy, 9 maybe, stood behind a wooden table stacked with wire and shell wind chimes. His brown hair curled wildly at the ends, and he had Grace's chin. In his hands was a chime made of bent copper and bottle caps that clinked like a song. Ethan froze. The boy blinked, uncertain now. Sorry. You just look like my dad." Ethan stepped forward slowly. "What's your name?" "Jack," the boy said, then looked down, suddenly embarrassed. "Want to hear one?" Ethan nodded. Jack lifted a chime and blew gently. The sound it made was clear, surprising, strangely beautiful. Something stirred in Ethan's chest. "That's yours if you want it," Jack added. $5, or 4 and a soda." Ethan smiled faintly. "Deal." He pulled out his wallet, but his hands shook. That chin, those eyes, the chime, this wasn't just any kid. A woman's voice rang out nearby. "Jack, don't wander." Ethan's breath caught. Grace. She was older now, her hair darker, pulled into a tight ponytail. Her eyes scanned the crowd and landed on Jack, then on Ethan. The moment their eyes met, time stilled. She didn't run, didn't smile, just stared. Then she turned, walking fast toward a folding chair, arms wrapped around herself. Jack tilted his head. "You know my mom?" Ethan cleared his throat. "We used to." Jack frowned. "She's always tired, works a lot, but she makes the best hot dogs." Ethan forced a smile. "I believe it." Then, trying to sound casual, he asked, "Did she ever tell you about your dad?" Jack shook his head. "Only that he didn't want kids. But I think maybe he didn't know." The words hit Ethan like a blow to the chest. He bought 2 more chimes. "Hey," Jack said as Ethan started to turn. "What's your name?" "Ethan." Jack nodded. "Thanks, Ethan." Ethan walked away, chimes clinking in his bag, mind spinning. Grace had told their son, his son, that he didn't want him? But he had never known. No call, no letter, nothing. Back in the SUV, Ethan sat without speaking. He pulled out the chime Jack had blown and held it in his palm. It shimmered softly, almost like a lullaby. A tune he didn't know he needed. A tune that said maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. Not yet. The following morning, Ethan Cole stood in front of the mirror in his penthouse bathroom, tie slack around his neck. His reflection looked tired. Not the kind of tired money could fix, but the kind that came from too many sleepless nights, and one wind chime too many. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out the copper chime Jack had sold him. Its twisted wire gleamed faintly in the morning light. He ran a thumb along the edge. Every sound it made haunted him with a question. What if Jack really is mine? In his office, the view of Tulsa looked the same. But Ethan wasn't the same. He ignored emails, ignored calls. Instead, he stared at the name he had scribbled on a yellow notepad. Grace Turner. He hadn't thought about her in years. Not really. Not since that night Mark barged into his apartment, voice low and urgent, saying, "She left. Said she's not cut out for your world. Also, she doesn't want kids, man. Said it straight." Ethan had believed him. He always trusted Mark. Now, a boy who looked like Grace and sounded like music had just sold him a wind chime. He tapped the notepad once, then called his driver. "Where to, sir?" the driver asked. "North Tulsa, 307 Laney Street." The house was modest. Single story, chipped paint, chain-link fence. A faded basketball sat in the front yard beside a stack of what looked like homemade chime parts. Ethan stepped out slowly, the chime in his coat making a soft sound with each step. He rang the doorbell, nothing. Then the door cracked open, Grace. She didn't speak, just stared. Ethan took off his sunglasses. "Grace, I just want to talk." She stepped out onto the porch, pulling the door closed behind her. She looked different, tougher, tired, but still her. "I don't have anything to say to you, Ethan. I think Jack might be my son." She flinched, then looked away. "You left," she said quietly. "You didn't call. You didn't write. Mark told me you walked away, said you didn't want kids." Her jaw tightened. "And you believed him?" He hesitated. "He's family." "I was pregnant, Ethan. I left messages. I sent a letter." Her voice cracked. "You never came." Ethan's breath caught. "I never got anything." She crossed her arms. "Because he made sure you didn't." Silence fell between them. Then she added, "I heard Mark came into some money not long after I disappeared. Partnered with a firm that bought part of your company." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Wait, you think Mark lied to me on purpose?" "You figure it out," she said, voice clipped. Ethan reached into his coat, pulled out the chime. "Jack made this," he said softly. "He said it's for someone who doesn't listen." Grace blinked, caught off guard. "Grace," he said, "if I had known—" "You didn't," she cut in. "And now you do. That's the only difference. A voice called from the backyard. "Mom, I fixed the green one." Jack. His face appeared in the side window, smeared with dirt, smiling. "Is he okay?" Ethan asked, almost a whisper. Grace's voice softened. "He's brilliant. He makes music out of trash. He thinks the wind sings." Ethan swallowed hard. "Can I see him again?" She shook her head. "Not yet. He doesn't know who you are. He doesn't know you exist. I want to be in his life." Grace looked down. "That's not your call anymore." He looked away, jaw clenched, then quietly asked, "Can I at least buy more chimes?" Grace gave a tired smile. "You're not getting out of here without one." As he walked back to the car, the wind picked up. The chime in his hand rang softly, like a whisper of forgiveness not yet given, but not denied either. Ethan stood at the window of his Tulsa office, city lights twinkling beneath clouds. But all he could see was Jack, his messy curls, his careful fingers holding twisted metal, his voice calling out, "Dad, listen." That sound still echoed in his chest. He pulled out the chime again. Jack's handiwork. Simple, clever. When the breeze moved, it let out a note that lingered like something unsaid. He set it on his desk. Dana buzzed in. "Your cousin Mark's here. Should I send him in?" Ethan paused. Mark, the last thread of family he trusted, or used to. "Yeah," Ethan said quietly. "Send him." Mark entered in his usual blazer and overconfidence, shaking off the rain like it owed him money. "Cousin," he said, grinning, "how's the Golden Tower today?" Ethan offered a tight nod. "Sit." Mark raised an eyebrow but obeyed. "Something up?" Ethan leaned forward. "You remember Grace Turner?" Mark's grin faltered just enough. "Of course. That was years ago. You told me she walked out, said she didn't want kids, that she was done." Mark gave a slow shrug. "Yeah, I mean, that's what you needed to hear, right? She left. I just passed it on." "No." Ethan's voice sharpened. "You told me she said that." Mark looked uncomfortable now. "Look, things were messy. We had that Colorado merger. I didn't want you distracted." Ethan stared, jaw tight. "I saw her, Mark. She had a child. His name's Jack. He's 9. Mark sat back. "Whoa. Yeah, whoa." Ethan stood, pacing. "You kept me from them. Why?" Mark straightened, shrugging. "Maybe I thought you were better off." Ethan turned slowly. "Or maybe you were building something, without me noticing." Mark's silence was answer enough. Ethan pointed at the door. "Get out." Mark opened his mouth, but Ethan cut in. "You lied. To me. About Grace. About Jack. I don't know what else, but I'm done trusting you." When Mark left, Ethan's hand hovered over the chime. It rang softly again, almost like it understood. Later that evening, Ethan drove himself, no chauffeur, no pretense, back to North Tulsa. The streets were darker here, more real. Kids played on a corner with cracked pavement chalk. A stray dog darted through an alley. He parked beside Grace's house and sat for a moment, watching the backyard through the fence. Jack was there, kneeling by a bucket of bottle caps and metal scraps. He hummed as he worked. Next to him, a cardboard box held half-finished chimes, each one more intricate than the last. Grace stepped onto the porch. She saw Ethan's car but didn't wave. He walked up anyway. Jack looked up and smiled. "You came back." Ethan knelt. "Yeah, I wanted to see what you were working on." Jack held up a bent fork strung with buttons. "Listen." It chimed. A tiny, sweet sound. "You made this?" Ethan asked, genuinely moved. Jack nodded proudly. "I use junk, but it sings if you put it together right." Ethan swallowed. "It's beautiful, Jack." Grace approached slowly, her arms crossed. "I didn't tell him yet," she said softly. Ethan stood. "I understand." She glanced at Jack, who was now testing a new piece with a screwdriver. "He doesn't know who you are," she said. "And if you break him, if you disappear—" "I won't," Ethan interrupted. "I swear." Grace studied his face. He's never had a man stick around. "I will," Ethan said, "even if I'm just the guy who buys chimes." Jack ran up, holding a new one. "Hey, look what I made." He handed Ethan a chime strung with tiny metal stars. A soda tab in the center caught the last light of day. Ethan touched it carefully. "It's perfect." That chime would hang in his office from now on, not as decoration, but as a promise, a tune for redemption, strung by the hands of the boy he never knew he had. The following week, Ethan found himself walking through rows of hand-painted booths at the Melodic Chime Festival. The air was filled with soft music, tinkling notes carried by wind, laughter from nearby children, and the subtle hum of possibility. He wasn't here for photos or handshakes. He was looking for Jack. Near the back, under a crooked tent marked Chimes and Things by Jack, Ethan saw him, bent over a work table, twisting wire with focused hands. Grace stood nearby, arms crossed, but her face less tense than before. Jack looked up. "Hey, you came back again." "I told you I would," Ethan smiled. Jack wiped his hands on his jeans and held up a new piece, an old key dangling from polished bottle caps. "I call this one lost and found." Ethan reached for it, fingers brushing the key. "What's the story?" Jack shrugged. "The key doesn't open anything, but it sounds nice when it swings." Ethan nodded slowly. "Sometimes things don't need to open anything to mean something." Grace watched them, arms slowly falling to her sides. "You okay?" Ethan asked her gently. "I'm trying," she admitted. "This isn't easy, Ethan, for either of us. I get it, but I'm not going anywhere." They stood there, both quiet, as a soft wind stirred the hanging chimes above. Suddenly, a voice interrupted. "Ethan Cole?" They turned. A man in a corporate windbreaker approached, flanked by two others with clipboards. Ethan sighed. "Yes?" "We're from Centera Power. The Houston deal you pulled out of last month? Our board wants a reconsideration. They'd like to meet again." I said no. "It's a billion-dollar project." Ethan glanced at Jack, who had gone quiet, watching the exchange with wide eyes, then back at Grace. "Tell the board," Ethan said. "I've already found something worth more." The men looked confused. "Excuse me?" "I'm investing in something else," Ethan replied. "Locally." They left, puzzled and murmuring. Grace raised an eyebrow. "You're really turning that down?" "I've made a lot of deals," Ethan said, "but none that mattered as much as this." Jack tugged Ethan's sleeve. "You want to make one with me?" Ethan smiled. "A deal?" Jack held up a bent fork and a red shoelace. "You bring the snacks, I bring the sound." "Deal," Ethan said, shaking his hand. The sun dipped low, casting golden streaks across the lot. Grace pulled a blanket from the chair and laid it on the grass. "You staying a while?" she asked. "If that's okay." She hesitated, then nodded. "It is." They sat together, watching Jack show his chimes to a younger girl with paint-stained fingers. Ethan leaned closer. "You know he's gifted, right?" Grace smiled faintly. "He sees rhythm where no one else does. Always did." Ethan reached into his pocket and pulled out the first chime Jack had ever sold him, the one with copper wire and a soda tab. "I kept this," he said. "It's not just music. It's the first time I heard what I'd been missing." Grace looked at it, then at him. "You really didn't know?" He met her eyes. "If I had, Grace, I would have been there every single day." The silence between them wasn't sharp anymore. It was gentle, like healing. Across the lawn, Jack spun in circles beneath the wind chimes, arms out like a bird. Ethan watched him. "He's got your laugh." Grace looked over. "And your stubbornness." A breeze passed through, sending all the chimes into song. And, for the first time in 10 years, the melody didn't sound like regret. It sounded like hope. Ethan sat on a folding chair in Grace's backyard, legs crossed, suit jacket tossed over the fence behind him. It was a Saturday afternoon, and the neighborhood buzzed with weekend chores, lawnmowers humming, dogs barking 2 houses over, radios spilling gospel from porches. Jack was crouched in the grass beside an overturned laundry basket, sorting through pieces of old jewelry and screws. He held up a spoon with a bent handle. "This one's got a good clang," he said, striking it gently with a pen cap. Ethan smiled. "You really hear all of that?" Jack nodded. "You can tell how a sound will finish before it starts. You just gotta listen hard enough." That sentence hit Ethan in the chest harder than it should have. He leaned in. "Your mom ever play anything? Instruments?" Jack shook his head. "Nah, she sings sometimes, when she's doing dishes or folding socks, but she always hums off key." Ethan laughed quietly. "Sounds like her." Grace stepped out the back door with 2 glasses of lemonade. "You're still here," she said, handing one to Ethan. "Can't get enough of these chimes," he said. "They're better than any playlist I've got." Grace leaned against the railing. "He's been building those since he was 5. First one was a broken fan blade and a Christmas bell." "I wish I'd seen that," Ethan said softly. Her eyes softened, just for a second. Then she glanced at Jack and changed the subject. "He's entering that citywide arts thing next month. We've been saving scraps." "I'd like to help," Ethan said. Grace shook her head. "We're fine." "I know you are," he said gently, "but I still want to." She said nothing, but didn't argue. Jack ran over holding a clunky new piece made from broken earrings and a coat zipper. "I call it static memory." Ethan tilted his head. "That's kind of brilliant." "I had a dream last night," Jack said, plopping beside him. "A big room full of wind chimes, all different, and I was in the middle, spinning around." Ethan blinked. "Was I there?" Jack paused. "You were outside the glass, listening." Grace tensed. Ethan tried to keep his voice steady. "Did you want me to come in?" Jack shrugged. "I think you were waiting for something." Ethan swallowed hard. He wasn't sure if it was just a dream, or if Jack's heart knew more than he was ready to say. That evening, Ethan returned to his high-rise apartment. For once, it felt too tall, too clean, too far removed from the color and clutter of Grace's backyard. He walked past the designer furniture, past the glass wine rack he hadn't touched in months. On the mantel sat a single chime, Jack's first. He picked it up and held it to the window. The wind tugged it gently, and it sang a hollow, tinny note, the kind of sound you only heard when you were alone. Ethan exhaled, then sat at his desk and opened his laptop. He didn't log into the energy dashboard, didn't check stocks or messages. Instead, he searched Tulsa Youth Music Program. His fingers hovered for a moment, then typed an idea. Windcraft, a sound space for local kids. He attached his name, his funding, a quiet note, inspired by a boy who hears things most of us miss. The next morning, Grace opened her front door to find a small package on the step. Inside was a handwritten letter and a miniature chime, this one built by Ethan himself, awkward but sincere. The letter read, "I don't expect forgiveness overnight, but I hear you now, and I want to keep listening." She stared at it for a long time, fingers tracing the wire loops. Behind her, Jack leaned in. "Is that from Ethan?" She nodded slowly. Jack picked up the chime and held it to his ear. "It's kind of crooked," he said, grinning. "Yeah," Grace murmured, "but it's trying." Grace stood over the sink, drying dishes while Jack sat cross-legged on the kitchen floor, twisting an old necklace into a chime hook. Outside, the wind blew steady, clinking the dozens of chimes he'd hung from tree limbs, fence posts, even the mailbox. A knock at the door pulled them both from the rhythm. Grace opened it and froze. Mark. He stood on the porch, wearing a tailored jacket and a polished smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Grace," he said smoothly, "it's been a while." Jack peeked around her legs. "Who's that?" She stepped out, shutting the door behind her. "What do you want, Mark?" He raised his hands. "Relax. Just checking in. Heard Ethan's been poking around, asking questions." "You mean questions about the son he never knew existed?" she snapped. "Yeah. Funny how truth makes people curious." Mark's face darkened for a split second, but he recovered fast. "Look, I get it. Emotions are running high, but let's not dig up old wounds." "You made that call," Grace said coldly. "You told him I left because I didn't want a child. You buried my letter. You took everything from Jack." Mark looked over his shoulder. "That's not how I remember it." Grace stepped closer. "I was 2 months pregnant when I wrote Ethan. You intercepted everything, and now you're here. Why? To scare me?" Mark's tone dropped. "To remind you how messy it gets when people start rewriting the past." Inside, Jack pressed his ear to the door. He couldn't hear every word, but one thing stuck. Pregnant. Letter, Ethan. Later that evening, Jack sat on the front step, quiet for once. Ethan pulled up in his car and saw him there, chime parts at his feet, but no melody. "Hey, Jack," Ethan said as he stepped out. "Everything okay?" Jack looked up, squinting. "Did you know about me?" Ethan froze. "I do now. But back then, when I was a baby?" Ethan crouched beside him. "No, I didn't. If I had, I would have come running." Jack nodded slowly. "Someone said you didn't want kids." Ethan looked at the boy, realizing how deep that lie had sunk. "That's not true," Ethan said. "That's never been true." Inside, Grace watched them from the kitchen window, heart caught between fear and hope. Jack reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out something small, a brass whistle on a string. "I was saving this," he whispered, "for a special chime. I think maybe you should have it." Ethan took it gently. "Thank you, Jack." At that moment, Grace stepped outside. "We need to talk," she said. Ethan stood. "I know." She looked tired, not just from the day, but from years of carrying truth alone. "I never meant to shut you out," she began. "But when you didn't answer, I thought you didn't care. Then Mark showed up, told me you moved on, that you'd said you didn't want this life." Ethan's chest tightened. "He lied to both of us." Grace nodded. "He told me you were selling the company, moving to Europe. He showed me fake emails, said you wanted clean breaks." Ethan stepped closer. "Grace, I swear, I never said any of that. He used both of us to protect his position. I think he knew I'd step back if I had a family. He needed me focused." They stood there, truth rising like dawn. Grace looked at Jack, now quietly sketching chime designs in a worn notebook. "He deserves more than we've given him." Ethan nodded. "Then let's give it to him, together." A soft gust stirred the wind chimes overhead. The brass whistle still dangled from Ethan's hand, glowing faintly in the porch light. That night, Jack added a new sketch to his notebook, a figure standing beneath a tree full of chimes. 2 adults stood beside him, and all the notes, finally, rang in harmony. The next morning, Ethan stood outside a weathered community center just 5 blocks from Grace's house. It had peeling paint, cracked windows, and a playground that hadn't seen new mulch in years. But in Ethan's mind, it was full of potential. He glanced at the notepad in his hand, his scribbled blueprint for windcraft. A safe space for kids to build, create, and be heard. Inside, Jack waited with Grace, his arms wrapped around a backpack stuffed with wire, beads, and old metal scraps. "This place is huge," Jack whispered, eyes wide as he stepped into the echoing gym. Grace glanced around, uncertain. "It's rough." "That's why I like it," Ethan said. "It's honest, and it's ours. If we want it. Jack ran to the far wall and tapped the peeling paint. Could I hang chimes here? Anywhere you want, Ethan replied. Grace folded her arms. And you're just funding this? Out of guilt? He turned to her gently. Out of purpose. And for him. Jack was already sketching on the back of an envelope, mumbling to himself. If we hang PVC pipes here, and use bottle caps up there, it'll sound like thunder. Ethan smiled. Told you, he had a vision. Later that day, back at Grace's, Jack brought out a cardboard box of keepsakes. Old nails, bent spoons, small ceramic tiles. He picked up the whistle Ethan had given him and began attaching it to a string of keys and washers. This one's for our workshop, he said proudly. The first chime for the new place. Grace watched quietly from the porch. Ethan sat beside Jack, helping him string beads between two rusted bolts. Jack, he said gently, do you ever think about what you want to be when you grow up? Jack shrugged. I want to make things. Stuff that sings. That's a good dream. Jack leaned closer. Do you think you could be part of it? Ethan's chest tightened. I'd be honored. That night, Ethan sat at his kitchen island, city lights flickering behind him. He couldn't stop thinking about Mark, about the lies, about the years he'd lost. He opened his laptop, digging through old emails. Then he saw it. Shit. An unread message from Grace. Dated 10 years ago. The subject line, please read this. He clicked it open. It was her voice, raw and scared. I'm 2 months pregnant. I don't know what you'll say, but I need you to know. I need you to be part of this. If you don't want that, I'll understand. But I hope you'll come. Tears blurred Ethan's vision. The message had been marked unread, but the forwarding address said it all. M. Cole at Cole Energy Corp. Mark's alias email. Mark had intercepted it. Ethan slammed the laptop shut. The next morning, he returned to Grace's place, jaw set. We need to talk, he said. She opened the door with Jack by her side. Ethan crouched. Hey, buddy, I'm going to borrow your mom for a second. Jack nodded, already distracted by the whistle chime. Out in the yard, Ethan told her everything. The email, Mark's deception, the fake address. Grace's face went pale. So he knew. This whole time. Ethan nodded, and he made sure I didn't. She sat down hard on the steps. I should have fought harder, she whispered. No, Ethan said. You did what you thought was right. He manipulated all of us. Grace's eyes welled. I was scared. Alone. I kept thinking if I reached out again and you didn't answer, I would have, Ethan said. I swear I would have come. From inside, Jack shouted, Hey! The chime sounds like a train bell. They both turned and smiled. Grace looked up at Ethan. So, what now? He held out his hand. Now. We build something honest. Together. She took it. And just like that, another chime clinked softly in the breeze. This one made of old keys, new beginnings, and a little boy's hope. Ethan stepped into the marble lobby of Cole Energy, but this time his stride wasn't for power, it was for truth. Upstairs, Mark sat in Ethan's chair, feet kicked up, flipping through quarterly reports like he owned the place. He didn't look up when Ethan walked in. Thought you were off playing handyman in North Tulsa, Mark muttered, smug. I was, Ethan said. Turns out building things with a kid is more honest than building with you. Mark looked up, eyebrows lifting. Something on your mind, cousin? Ethan dropped a printed email onto the glass desk. This is from Grace, 10 years ago. You intercepted it. You created a fake address under my name. Mark's smirk faded. I traced the forwarding, Ethan continued. You rerouted it. You deleted others. You made sure I never knew. Mark stood, slow and defensive. You were distracted, focused on expansion. I just kept it that way. You stole from me, Ethan growled. Not money, not a deal, a life, a son. Mark scoffed. And look at you now, playing dad? You think that changes the world? No, Ethan said, but it changes me. Mark shook his head. This is business, Ethan. You knew the rules. Ethan stepped closer. Then here's a new rule. You're out. Mark's mouth opened, stunned. You can't do that. I just did, Ethan said, pulling a signed board resolution from his jacket. Emergency vote. Majority support. Your stake is being bought out. You'll get your payout, and then you vanish. Mark's voice cracked. You'd really toss blood for a broken family? Ethan's jaw tightened. For a real one? Every time. Mark scoffed, chest heaving, but didn't fight. He grabbed his jacket, shoved past Ethan, and muttered, You'll regret this. I already regretted trusting you, Ethan replied. The office door slammed. Ethan turned to the window, the skyline sprawling beyond. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like clearing debris from a foundation, so something better could rise. That evening, Grace answered a knock to find Ethan standing there, holding a small wind chime, 3 coins, a thimble, and the brass whistle Jack had given him. I handled it, Ethan said simply. Her eyes searched his. Handled what? Mark, he said. He's out. Out of the company. Out of our lives. She stepped onto the porch, closing the door gently behind her. I read that email, he said, the one he kept from me, and I saw everything I missed, because of him. I don't want to miss any more. She looked down at the chime in his hand. You made this? He nodded. It's not perfect, but I wanted it to sound like us, pieces of a story finally told. She touched the thimble. My grandmother used to sew with one just like this. I found it in the workshop, Ethan said. Jack said it reminded him of you. The wind stirred, and the chime whispered gently, like breath caught between memory and hope. Inside, Jack pressed his face to the window, watching them. Grace finally smiled. He's proud of you. He won't say it, but he is. Then I'll keep showing up until he does. She nodded, then opened the door. Come inside. Dinner's getting cold. Jack looked up as Ethan entered. Hey, Ethan said. I brought something for the workshop. Want to help me hang it? Jack grinned, eyes lighting up. Yeah, let's put it by the door, so people hear it when they walk in. Together, they stepped back into the evening light. Ethan held the chime while Jack tied the last knot. As the final loop tightened, a gust of wind passed through, and the chime sang, soft, imperfect, but unmistakably real. Like forgiveness, like family, like a second chance ringing out into the dusk. Saturday morning rolled in warm and breezy, sunlight dripping through the leaves above the old community center. A banner stretched across the chain-link fence in big block letters, Windcraft, Grand Opening Celebration. Inside, Jack ran from table to table, adjusting strings, realigning makeshift chimes, and checking the tuning of each wind sculpture like a conductor prepping his orchestra. Ethan watched from the doorway, sleeves rolled up, tie long gone. Grace stood beside him, clipboard in hand, watching her son with a small, proud smile. He's nervous, she said. He's a leader, Ethan replied. He just doesn't know it yet. Across the room, Jack waved. Dad, we're out of bottle caps. Ethan grabbed a bucket. On it. Grace blinked, still not quite used to the word, but she didn't stop him. Soon, kids began trickling in. Some came curious. Others clutching tin cans, spoons, and stray beads from home. Jack welcomed each one with a lanyard and a roll of wire, then showed them where to start. By noon, the room was alive with sound. Not just music, but laughter, clinking metal, and the light tap of creativity. At the back, Ethan noticed a man in a suit standing stiffly near the wall, watching everything. It was Charles Renner, a partner from Centera Power, the very project Ethan had walked away from. Renner approached. "Cole," he said, "didn't expect to find you here, running a tin can jamboree." Ethan gave a polite nod. "It's a wind chime workshop." Renner chuckled, confused. "You passed on a 9-figure deal for this?" Ethan looked around, at Jack helping a shy girl hang her first piece, at the mother wiping tears watching her son finally open up. "Yes," Ethan said, "every day of the week." Renner shook his head. "You've changed." Ethan smiled. "That was the point." Renner left. No handshake, no deal. And it didn't matter. That afternoon, Ethan stepped outside with Jack. Together, they hung the very first Windcraft chime over the entrance, a ring of old keys, soda tabs, and the whistle Jack had once given him. Jack looked up. "You think it's good enough?" Ethan nodded. "It's perfect. It sounds like heart." They stepped back as the breeze rolled in. The chime whispered its tune. Soft, layered, imperfect. Just like them. Later, as families filed out and the sun dipped low, Jack walked over with a small box. "I made you something," he said. Ethan opened it to find a new chime. Sleek, symmetrical, balanced. Each piece labeled in Jack's handwriting. Trust, time, truth, try again. Ethan's throat caught. "You named the parts?" Jack nodded. "They're the steps to fixing things." Ethan hugged him close. "I'm still working on them." "You're doing good," Jack whispered. From across the lot, Grace called, "Pizza's here!" Jack ran off and Ethan turned back to the door. The chime swung gently, ringing out into the street. People paused. Some smiled. One little boy stopped to listen, really listen. Ethan closed his eyes. He'd walked away from boardrooms and bonuses, from control and comfort. But this was music, and it was only just beginning. The next morning, Ethan was in the workshop early, unlocking the doors just as dew clung to the grass and wind stirred the low chimes overhead. He lit the coffee pot, rolled up his sleeves, and began unpacking a new box of donated parts: silverware, chains, mason jar rings. Half an hour later, Jack came bounding in, cheeks flushed from the cold, clutching something wrapped in newspaper. "Close your eyes," he grinned. Ethan laughed but did as told, holding out his hands. Jack carefully placed the bundle in Ethan's palms. "Okay," Jack said. "Now." Ethan peeled back the paper slowly. Inside was a wind chime, carefully crafted, with smooth river stones, bent copper wire, and in the center a small etched pendant. "Begin again." Jack bit his lip. "I made it for you. Not for the workshop. For you." Ethan was quiet for a moment, holding it up. The morning breeze caught the stones, making them gently knock together with a calm, grounded tone. "I don't even know what to say," he whispered. "Say you'll hang it up," Jack said. "Somewhere that matters." Ethan knelt. "Then it goes right over my desk." Later that afternoon, Grace dropped by with homemade cookies and fresh flyers for next weekend's neighborhood chime build. Her hair was tucked under a baseball cap, but there was a lightness in her smile that Ethan hadn't seen since their 20s. He met her in the doorway. "Got a second?" "Sure," she said. He led her to the side of the building, where a new sign had just been mounted in reclaimed wood, Windcraft Center, founded by Ethan, Jack, and Grace. Her fingers brushed the name, voice low. "You put me on it?" Ethan looked at her. "You built the life. Jack built the sound. I just caught up." She looked up, eyes warm. "I never stopped loving music," she said. "I just didn't think I had the time to hear it again." "Then we'll listen together," Ethan replied. Inside, the kids worked in clusters, some hammering bottle caps, others stringing washers. Jack moved between them like a conductor, laughing, coaching, encouraging. "He belongs here," Grace said softly. "And he belongs with us," Ethan added. That night, as the building emptied and the sun began to set, Jack ran up with a folded sheet of paper. "Look!" Ethan opened it to find a drawing of 3 wind chimes, one tall, one medium, one short, all hanging from the same beam. Beneath them, Jack had written, "Family Harmony." Grace peeked over his shoulder and laughed. "I guess we've been illustrated." Ethan smiled at Jack. "You're the best artist I've ever known." Jack grinned. "And you're better than I imagined." The words hit Ethan hard. He bent down and wrapped his son in a hug. Later, while locking up, Grace lingered by the doorway. "You really gave up that big deal?" she asked. Ethan nodded. "Yeah, and it feels better than closing any merger ever did." She was quiet for a moment. Then, almost shyly, she said, "There's room at our dinner table tonight. Jack's hoping you'll stay." Ethan looked at her, heart full. "Then I'm not going anywhere." The breeze picked up just then, and the pendant on Jack's chime whispered its tune behind them, soft, steady, and full of promise. Begin again. A soft rain fell over Tulsa, pattering gently on the roof of the Windcraft Center. Inside, the lights glowed warm against the gray day. Jack stood in the middle of the room, holding a wind chime wrapped in blue tissue paper. "I want to give it to him tonight," he said, glancing up at Grace. She smiled softly. "Then make sure it sings just right." Jack nodded and walked over to Ethan, who was sorting hooks at the back table. "Hey," Jack said, voice a little shy. "I made something." Ethan turned, curious. "Yeah?" Jack handed him the tissue-wrapped chime. "I started it the day I met you. I finished it last night." Ethan unwrapped it carefully. His breath caught. It was beautiful. Hand-cut wood stained dark, with 6 silver pieces hanging from it. A compass pendant, a bolt from an old swing, a house key, a broken watch face, a whistle, and a final piece etched with a single word, home. Ethan ran his fingers across each one, slowly. Jack whispered, "That's our story." Ethan crouched down, voice thick. "You gave me back more than time, Jack. You gave me something I thought I'd never deserve, this second chance." The chime stirred, catching a soft current from the cracked window. It made a warm, low sound that seemed to pulse like a heartbeat. That night, they hung it in the center of the workshop, above the welcome table. Grace stepped beside Ethan, her hand brushing his. "He put everything into that chime." "I heard it," Ethan said. "Every note." Outside, the rain slowed. They walked to the truck as Jack held Ethan's hand, swinging it slightly like he used to with Grace when he was little. On the drive home, Jack leaned from the back seat. "Do you think it'll still be ringing when people walk in tomorrow?" Ethan glanced at him in the mirror. "I think it'll ring even when no one's there. It's the kind of sound that stays." The next morning, Ethan arrived at his Tulsa office for the first time in weeks. His old assistant, Dana, blinked in surprise. "Mr. Cole," she said, standing, "we weren't expecting—" "I'm just here to clear out," he said with a quiet smile, "and to hang something up." He stepped into his glass-walled office, once the epicenter of numbers and steel. Now, he stood in front of his desk, took out Jack's chime from its box, and hooked it near the window where the wind could touch it. The whistle and compass caught the light. Dana peeked in. "That's new?" "It's a reminder," Ethan said, "of what matters." He took down framed photos of stockholder meetings, replacing them with the drawings Jack had made, a chime blueprint, a doodle of the 3 of them at the workbench, and one simple image of a home with music notes floating above it. Later that evening, Grace stood in her kitchen chopping carrots when Ethan came through the door, holding Chinese takeout and a crumpled brown paper bag. "What's in the bag?" she asked. He handed it to her. Inside was the house key from the chime. "You sure?" she said, eyes wide. "I want you to have it," Ethan replied. "We built this together. Whatever comes next, I want it to start here." Jack burst in from the living room. "Are we eating or what? I'm starving." They all laughed. Grace handed him the bag. "Take this. Your dad just gave me half a house." Jack beamed. "We'll call it the Chime house." As night fell, the three of them sat around the kitchen table, wind brushing softly outside. And in the distance, even through the walls, Ethan imagined he could hear it. Jack's chime. Still ringing, still redeeming. A knock echoed through the long hallway of the law offices on Pearl Street. Ethan stood outside Mark's door, holding a folder under his arm, jaw set firm. Mark opened the door and blinked. "Didn't expect to see you again, Ethan. Thought you'd traded suits for string and bottle caps." Ethan stepped in without a word, laying the folder flat on the polished desk. "Read it." Mark frowned, but flipped it open. His face slowly drained of color as he skimmed the documents. Email logs, server, data, witness statements. Everything. The full digital trail proving he had rerouted Grace's emails, faked a breakup message, interfered in a child's life. This is out of context," Mark said quickly. Ethan's voice was quiet but sharp. "You made me believe Grace had walked away. You said she didn't want kids. You manipulated everything, just to keep the company in your hands." Mark straightened, folding his arms. "And you would have thanked me for it back then. You didn't want a kid either." "I didn't know what I wanted," Ethan said, "because you stole the chance for me to decide." Mark scoffed. "So, what now? You going to sue me?" Ethan shook his head. "No, I'm going to let everyone else see who you really are. This is going to the board, to Grace's lawyer, to anyone you ever smiled at while lying through your teeth." Mark's voice rose, brittle. "You'll tank your own reputation just to make a point?" "No," Ethan said. "I'm fixing my past. And for once, I'm not afraid of the truth." Mark went pale. "This'll ruin everything." Ethan looked him in the eye. "No, Mark. It'll finally set it right." Later that evening, Ethan returned to Grace's place. Jack sat cross-legged on the living room floor, stringing beads into a small chime. Grace was nearby, folding laundry with a calm rhythm. "I did it," Ethan said, hanging his coat. Grace glanced up. "You really faced him?" Ethan nodded. "The board knows. His access is suspended. Legal team's preparing terms to separate him from Coal Energy for good." Jack looked up. "Does that mean he's gone?" Ethan knelt beside him. "He won't control what happens to us ever again." Jack studied his face, then handed over the chime he was building. "Then this is ready." Ethan looked it over. A smaller design, but intricate. In the center was a bent music note made from twisted wire. "What's this one called?" Ethan asked. Jack smiled. "Truth Chime. Because sometimes the truth is loud, even if it hurts." Grace watched them, eyes glassy. She stepped forward, then, slowly, she reached out and brushed Ethan's cheek with the back of her hand. "You fought for us," she whispered. "Not just for me and Jack, but for yourself, too." "I just wanted to stop running," Ethan said, "and start standing still with both of you." She leaned in, kissed his cheek, and for the first time in a decade, he closed his eyes without guilt. Later, Ethan sat at the kitchen table with a fresh cup of coffee. Jack joined him, resting his chin on his arms. "Do you think wind chimes get tired?" Jack asked suddenly. Ethan laughed. "No, I think they wait, until the wind moves them." Jack nodded thoughtfully. "That's kind of like you. You were quiet, but now you're making noise." Ethan smiled. "Maybe I just needed the right breeze." Jack reached for his sketch pad, started drawing something, 3 wind chimes again, but this time each had a name carved into the wood. Grace, Jack, Ethan. Together, finally. A month passed. Spring rolled in soft and full, carrying Tulsa's breeze with the scent of lilacs and grass. And at the corner of 6th and Maple, a once-abandoned hardware lot had transformed into something new, the Windcraft Music Workshop. On its faded brick walls, kids had painted flowers and suns, notes and stars. Above the front door hung Jack's chime, the one that read, "Begin Again." The grand opening fell on a Saturday. Grace pinned flyers to lampposts. Ethan sorted name tags inside. Jack organized tables stacked with scraps, buttons, bicycle spokes, broken spoons, glass beads. Kids poured in by the dozen, some shy, others noisy, but all curious. By noon, the air was filled with clangs, taps, soft humming, and laughter. Ethan stood in the center of it all, surrounded by color and clamor. Then someone tugged at his sleeve. "Mr. Cole?" It was a thin boy named Miles. "I never made music before. My mom says we couldn't afford lessons." Ethan knelt to his level. "You don't need money to make music, just hands and heart." Miles smiled. "Can I keep this one?" Ethan nodded. "It's yours." Nearby, Jack taught 3 girls how to balance the chimes so the wind could kiss them evenly. He guided their hands, his voice calm but firm, just like Ethan had once done with him. Grace watched from the garden edge. Her eyes brimmed, but her smile was easy. After lunch, Ethan brought out a chalkboard and called the kids together. "We're starting something today," he said, voice steady. "Not just a workshop, not just art, but a place where your voice matters, where your sound gets heard." He paused, catching Jack's gaze. "Because sometimes music starts where words stop." Applause rippled through the courtyard. Behind them, volunteers began to install a mural, a large wind chime shaped like a tree with the leaves made of metal tags, each one engraved with a child's name. Grace touched one gently. "They'll remember this, even when they grow up. They'll carry it with them," Ethan said. Just then, an older man in a suit approached. He looked out of place, too polished, too rigid. "Excuse me," he said. "Are you the founder?" "I'm Ethan Cole," he answered. "I'm with the Tulsa Education Grant Committee," the man said. "We saw your project. The city's considering a new fund for creative youth programs. Yours might qualify, if you're interested." Ethan blinked. "You're serious?" The man smiled. "It's rare to find something this genuine. You're not just teaching craft, you're building community." Jack tugged Ethan's hand. "Did he say money?" Ethan laughed. "Maybe enough to build even more chimes." That evening, long after the crowd left, the 3 of them stayed behind to sweep, tuck chairs, gather leftovers. As twilight settled in, Jack pointed toward the mural. "Look," he said, "the tree's full." Every leaf danced in the breeze. Dozens of names sang together in soft metal notes. "It's beautiful," Grace whispered. "It's just the beginning," Ethan said. "We're going to need more branches." Jack reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a crumpled sketch. "I already drew a second tree." Ethan chuckled. "Of course you did." Together, they stood beneath the chime tree as its sound shimmered into the night, gentle, layered, full of truth. The kind of music you feel in your bones. The kind no storm could silence. Tulsa's Spring Chime Festival bloomed beneath cloudless skies. Main Street bustled with families, local bands, food trucks, and rows of artisan booths. But it was the far end of the park, lined with wind chimes crafted by kids, that drew the biggest crowd. A hand-painted banner fluttered above, Windcraft's First Family Sound Garden. Ethan stood near the entrance, straightening his tie with one hand and holding Grace's with the other. Jack raced ahead, a wind chime swinging from his grip. "Wait for us!" Grace called, laughing. Jack turned, grinning wide. "We're the last booth. They're saving it." They passed vendors, clinking sounds echoing through the air, each note a different story. As they approached their booth, a hush fell. Ethan looked up. Dozens had gathered around Jack's booth. Reporters, city council members, teachers. In the center stood a large oak frame, and from its top beam hung 3 chimes. The first, Jack's original, the one with the compass, whistle, and word home. The second, a joint creation made by kids from the workshop. Bits of copper, old keys, soda tabs, all shimmering together. And the third, Jack's newest. A polished wind chime shaped like a family tree, branches curling, each leaf engraved with 3 names: Jack, Grace, Ethan. Jack stepped onto the platform. A local organizer handed him the mic. "Hi," Jack began, voice steady despite the crowd. "A year ago, I thought wind chimes were just noise. Now I know they're music. They tell stories when we don't have words." He turned, motioning to the third chime. "This one's for my family," he said. "We got lost once, but we found each other again, and that's the tune I wanted to share." The crowd clapped. Some wiped their eyes. Grace leaned into Ethan's side, her head resting against his shoulder. "You proud of him?" she whispered. Ethan's throat tightened. "More than I ever thought I could be." After the speech, they stepped onto the platform together, father, mother, son, and tied the chime to the oak beam. A breeze caught it instantly, sending a melodic ripple through the air. Jack smiled. "There, now everyone hears us." The sun dipped lower. People passed through the garden, ringing chimes gently with their fingers. One little girl whispered, "I want to build one like Jack's." A teacher nodded. "Then let's sign you up." Ethan watched as families lingered. Kids sketched ideas in notebooks. Strangers talked like neighbors. A woman beside him said, "This isn't just a booth, it's a movement." That evening, as cleanup began and booths folded away, Ethan, Grace, and Jack stayed behind. They sat under the oak, eating leftover kettle corn from a paper bag. Jack rested his head in Grace's lap, legs stretched across Ethan's. "You think it'll always ring?" Jack asked, staring up at the branches. Grace ran her fingers through his hair. "As long as someone listens," Ethan added, "and someone remembers why it matters." The wind picked up again, a soft lullaby of metal and memory. Jack closed his eyes, whispering, "Sounds like us." And as dusk settled over Tulsa, the chimes rang on. Not just for the 3 of them, but for everyone who ever needed a second chance, and music to lead the way home.